Me on the road to truth via the path of non-contradiction. Join us each week on Feet to the Fire, a show with the goals of examining a subject matter on its own merits and test how it stands up to the many possibilities found in reality. All without pre-drawn conclusions found in personal bias. No left or right wings here. No pounding the pulpit of ego-driven my way or the highway attitudes. But there are no free passes given either. Answers to questions are important, but equally important is the reasons and methods used to find the answer. The lack of contradiction is the final judge here on Feet to the Fire. Feet. Sunday evenings, 8 to 11 Eastern. Fire. How do you listen? www.feet2fire.com for more information.
The views expressed in the following show are of the host, the guest, and the callers. The content of the following show, its accuracy, authenticity, and the ramifications of the use or application of said content is the responsibility of those speaking and listening, not the broadcast medium.
And we are live, Feet to the Fire. I'm your host, James Athayanchik, the Black Knight. Talk radio. Here we go. We are live. Everything's working so far. No problems. I don't want to touch anything because it's all working. We got some stuff for you today. I do have a recording that I did earlier with Jim Jatras. He's a pretty good guy. I saw him doing reports on One American News Network. And I liked his stand on Syria, and it was informed stand. He knew he was talking about experientially. He's been there, so to speak, and he actually has. So I asked him to come on a while back, and you can look in the archives on the YouTube channel or in the audio. There is interviews we did on Russia, as well as the Ukraine. And so he had brought my attention to an article that was written about the funding terrorists in Syria. I asked if he'd come on and talk about it, and he did, so we recorded that earlier, and I will play that after I go over the news and so on. And we have a visit from Less Visible as well, a new metaphysical, political, geomagnetical commentary. I like Les when he talks about the stuff. It's good because he's spiritual, and yet he's not like some kind of holy religious man, and he's very well versed in many things. So when he can speak again experientially and deep. Plus he's a regular guy, and he has his problems. Oh, he fits right in. He fits right in with us. So seeking the truth, always committed to the inevitable, as he says to God. So he will be here as well. Let me see what I can do here as far as the news here. Let me turn him. He's just check to make sure anything last second. Okay. So let me click on to the webpage scenario. And then we got Bern. I just put this up before the show. Bernie Sanders and his wife was under FBI investigation for bank fraud. And there's been a lot of stuff coming out on Twitter that has the memes and whatnot about him calling Trump a fraud. And now he's being investigated along with his wife. Primarily, I guess, his wife, but he's involved as well for bank fraud. Apparently there was a college that he or she or they were involved with, and apparently what is happening is misrepresented the financial state of the college in order to get loans, which is bank fraud. So other topics, and again, as I usually do, I'll put all these links underneath when I'm done, because I kind of get new stuff and I go off the top, and this way I like to do it at the end. Besides, you're supposed to be watching and listening intently when I'm talking anyway, so. But a couple other links along with this. You have Chuck Todd, CNN, who interviewed Bernie Sanders and didn't ask him a single time about this investigation. Can you imagine if it was a Trump surrogate on there? That's all they would be talking about. And Sanders responds to this ongoing thing, the Washington Post. It's kind of interesting because, of course, he downplays it a lot, naturally. But anyway, I bring this up. It's not that I'm looking for any kind of damage or what have you, but I bring it up because it is my opinion that we are in a time of what I call, the revealing. You know, that's what the word apocalypse really means. That Greek word. We're in a time of revealing, and what is happening? Jesus talked about it in the end, and latter days. Latter days, very interesting phrase. You know, later on, the latter days toward the end. Didn't say the end days, but it could be. But anyway, latter days, things that were whispered in the inner rooms will be shouted on the mountaintop, and things that were kept in darkness will be lit. So it isn't interesting that it is the internet that is really the flashlight here that's lighting the spotlight, that is lighting these things up, because it allows us to I'm talking to you. You know, you think ABC, NBC, and whatnot would give me an access? I could think of a lot of reasons why they wouldn't. Not even getting into political because of the kind of the laid back scenario here. But this is what the deal is. We're in a time of this revealing. I don't want to make sure I accidentally got a mouse here. I don't want to push any buttons and have something freak out. We're in a time of this revealing, and what is happening is things are coming out. People are getting a chance to use the classical terms, repent, to change their ways, come clean. They can become whistleblowers, and come clean and deal with trauma with doing that. But they were involved in the trauma before. And if they choose not to, then they're making an open, obvious, conscious choice to go with the dark side. And this is the split you're seeing. People are seeing it's like insanity, and people are going, "What? That doesn't make any sense. They're crazy." Well, they're splitting. For reality and delusion is splitting here. Those who are grounded and more into reality, open to all things, because we have been given a line of bull. I mean, not only intentionally, but just because people are learning and discovering new things and taking a refreshed look back, that you have to be open to this. But at the same time, be grounded. You just can't believe somebody. I was talking to a longtime friend, been on the show too, and he was kind of commenting about how I don't believe anybody. And I don't believe anybody. I don't not believe anybody either. What I do is I listen to what it is, and if you have truth, if you have a piece of the real puzzle, other things will correlate with it. Truth is not one guy standing alone in somewhere with the truth. I mean, it may start out that way, but then it starts to correlate with things. So, anyway, Bernie Sanders, as I mentioned, let me go back to the page. Bernie Sanders is getting under the spotlight. They all are. Everyone is. You look at Comey, look at all these people, and that's just this political scenario here, let alone in business and across the world and in politics and war outside. So I added that after I already programmed the show here. Also today there was a rally for peace, they called it. It started out by a rally against political violence, and then I guess to shorten it, Rally for Peace. Mike Cernovich and Jack Posobiec. I have a hard time saying his name because I have a problem with saying, dyslexia type thing. But both of those guys are there as well as others, and they had I saw snippets that were on, I guess it's Periscope or YouTube or whatever, and so on. I got some stuff coming in the chat room. Let me stop and do this before I forget. I got Digital Diva. I like the alliteration. Container ship crashing into the Navy vessel. The USS Fitzgerald was dead in the water when the cargo ship turned around and came back and crashed into the Navy vessel. Some are saying it was EMP technology that killed the electronic on a naval ship, and they were dead in the water. Of course, speaking of corroboration, that's something maybe they wouldn't want to say because, hey, we're vulnerable, and what have you. And then someone hacked the navigation system to turn the cargo ship around. Now, I did hear I've not heard this latest scenario, and send me any information on that. I'll update it on my systems here. But I did hear that it was released that the cargo ship was on autopilot at the time. That's all that was said in the story that came out, which would, allow the possibility of hacking and turning it. Because from what I understand, the ship did turn significantly, if not 90 degrees significantly, and rammed it, head on. And no one knew anything was happening. And they got radar mania on all ships and all problems. So it did hit it head on. And let me tell you, those cargo ships are heavy. I deal with those containers, and they're just for my truck, it's heavy. I mean, I have some of those containers are 40,000 pounds of cargo plus the container, which is about 8,000 pounds for a 40-foot container. So you start adding hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these 40,000-pound containers on there, then probably the ship itself and whatnot. And when it hits it head on, I mean, I was pretty impressed that they hit that head on and the Navy ship didn't just crack like a pencil. I mean, I know people have died in there, which is terrible, and I understand there was severe damage to it, but it goes to show that thing can take an awful lot of wallop. So that's very interesting, Digital Diva. If you could send me information on that, I'd like to include that in the notes for tonight. Because that's one of the problems with this whole electronic world we're in, with the hacking. I mean, you're talking about the Russian hacking the elections. That's about the least possible hacking that can happen. I mean, all these. I mean, I know in Illinois, for example, watching how it was done, is we put it in the sheet and we colored in the little circles, and when it was done, they took the sheet and they scanned it in, and the sheet, as it scanned in, went down in the bottom, and so they're scanning it electronically. And then that's physically taken elsewhere, and you would have to have somebody hack up. And I saw that. A piece that was done by, and I can't think of her name, right before the election, a prominent person involved in this. I can't think of her name. Somebody could type it in there. They showed how when they count the votes, they could skew it by programming. But for someone to come in off the internet, I mean, if you have a computer that's not on the internet, you're done. And a lot of these computers aren't necessarily Windows, and they're not on the internet. And they put the results into digital media. Now, if you mean somebody physically doing it there's a possibility of that. Most likely, most voter fraud is simply dead people voting, and people voting multiple times being bussed around. I mean, that's been exposed by the Veritas exposed them confessing to it and doing it. So very interesting about that hacking. And that's the problem with all this autopilot cars, trucks, the planes. In fact, I had a while ago, I want to mention this. I was doing the other show that I do on occasion, a fun show, which I'm going to do next Saturday. Maybe I'll talk about that a little bit, and I happen to have a guy on unrelated music, whatever, and his job is a pilot of commercial. First, he was in the military jets, and then commercial pilot. And I said, "Whoa, can I ask you a question?" And I went into 9/11 about them doing the 270-degree barrel roll and all that stuff. I said, "I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, how is that possibly done? Can be done actually?" And he said that the people, and I've never heard this. I've never heard this before or since, that the people who would be hijacking wouldn't need to know how to fly the plane. They would need to know how to program the GPS autopilot. So they could program in a particular point, and the plane would fly itself there. Now, still don't know about the 270 or 80 degree barrel roll, flying 6 feet off the ground and all that stuff, but it was a very interesting point to be noted that you don't know how to fly the plane. You just have to know how to run the GPS and disable any override. So, see what I mean about segueing around? I hope that don't mind. I like doing that because it's stream of consciousness, and the same thing goes with guests and people in the chat room or whatever. So appreciate the little tip there, Digital Diva. I like that. I did have a quote. I was listening to Zeph Daniels. Somebody might Google that name and check it out if you're interested. He's how would I describe him? Maybe, first of all, he's a musician, and his forte would be like soundtracks, among other things. So a lot of stuff he does is soundtracky in nature. He does a lot of avant-garde type stuff, and it's available free. You can look him up on Spreaker. In fact, you guys send me some email if you want. I'm thinking about doing Spreaker for the audio, but so I listened to him, and he's, I would say he's kind of a layman's spiritual guy, kind of charismatic, but not related to any church, spiritual type. And I like to listen to him now and again. And as with anybody I listen to, I correlate, I agree, and I disagree. But he was talking about something, and I reminded of James 1:27, and I put it down in Facebook here. Pure, and I love James, the book of James. There's 5 books of the Bible that I recommend. The 4 Gospels and James. Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God and Father is this: to visit widows and orphans in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. And I put down, and this is a spiritual principle you can use. You can learn 2 ways. You can, in an example, you can learn by a good example, you can learn by a bad example. And the better the example, the more you can emulate. The worse your example, what you do is you invert it. So you can learn a lot about God by learning about the devil or Satan or evil and inverting it. So if pure and undefiled religion is widows and orphans, meaning the vulnerable people in the world going back in time, orphans and widows didn't have a husband to protect and to provide sustenance for, maintain, they were vulnerable. And there were laws put in various religions to take care of them, take care of the people. So the idea of who would be the vulnerable today and what would be the opposite of that? Well, abortion. They're taking kids before they're even not born, breaking them up and selling their parts and whatever. And human trafficking in general, but mostly it's child and women, isn't it? Boys too. Boys. That's why children and women are the main traffickers. You have Big Pharma and Agra. You have Big Pharma who are drugging people. Pharma. Pharmacy and pharmacological. That pharma part is a Greek word. Pharmakia would be the root, kind of the generic way you would say the tenseless version of it. And it is it's translated in English as like witchcraft or sorcery. So that you're putting spells on. Well, what a great term to use for chemicals which are putting a spell on the person. So you have Big Pharma. You instead of treating healing people, they're just treating symptoms and keeping them slaves. And you have the Agra, which is changing genetic makeup and making poisonous and problematic foods. And of course, war. War is going to hit the elderly, the women and children. Women and children. I mean, in today's world, women could be heads of household. It's a little different now than at the time. But when we're talking about a lot of these countries like Syria and whatnot, it's still back in the day. And so all these things are problematic. So that's how I looked at it. Of course, the healthcare issues that we have also deal with women, children, the elderly, and whatnot. So this whole healthcare crisis stuff. So that is a little piece there that I just popped in my head, and I thought I would put that up there. Now, there's a clip, and I'm afraid to do this because last week I played a clip of a guy put together. It was really funny, of when Trump was in, it was either the G7 or EU. He kind of pushed his way through to the front and was doing this with his shirt, and somebody overlaid a rap song, "Move, bitch, get out of the way," and he had the sunglasses, and it was kind of funny, and they had this guy laughing on the side. The guy had took together a couple of things and put them together. I thought it was pretty funny. And it turns out that the song was copyright. They got in touch with me on YouTube, and this particular company says, no, you can play the song, but in agreeing to allow the song to be on there, we're allowed to put commercials in there. So all my stuff is commercial free. If you see a commercial there, it's probably because something inside has a copyright, not a violation. I've never had any violations, but I've had a copyright claim. And a lot of places settle the claim by simply adding a commercial, which is a good way to do it. I just think that it's funny that guy. That video didn't have the commercials on it, but my use of it did. So I don't know about that. But The Russians Are Coming is a movie. If you could, probably what you could just do to save a lot of grief is to Google Russians Are Coming. Russians Are Coming emergency. Do that, and it's kind of funny because this is what I see happening. That was a comedy back in the 60s, back in the height of the Cold War. In the movie, a Russian sub breaks down off the coast of the United States, and it's a comedy, so they're all trying to stop having an emergency. And it just went to show how human, the whole point of the thing, it was basically how human we all are. And but it was funny because it's a funny, so the people are silly, and the Russians are coming silly, and it reminds me so much of what's going on with this whole Russian Russophobia with the non-existent Russian connections and all that. So I put that up there. I'll put the links to this in the bottom of the show too, so you can do that. Yeah, this is. I'm gonna see if I can click on this and have it work. This is a relationship to the story earlier. Let me open it up here. There. There's Bernie Sanders tweeting out, "I don't remain responsible, but real Donald Trump is a fraud." And then we have CBS News, Bernie and Jane Sanders are under FBI investigation for bank fraud. So I guess it goes under the old takes one to know one scenario. I don't know. But again, it goes back to this point where we're in a time of waking up. When I play the clip, about 20-minute interview with Jim Jatras, this video came out after our interview, and it's exactly about what we're talking about, the myth of the Syrian moderate rebels, which the United States is supporting and praising, but there aren't any. You either are not, or you're weaponized. What's the word? Radicalized. So, elephant shoes. I guess it is. They have a weird way of spelling it in the chat room. Tippin' Turtle, another name. Some of these names keep coming back. So there's I tell you, One American News Network. If you have AT&T or I think it's Dish Network, you have them. But you can go to their website that tells you, and if not, send a message. It's really good. So I actually pay $4.99 a month to get Cloud TV, KLOWD.TV, so I can stream One American News and watch it. It's fantastic. So links I do already have in there for that one in particular. I'll get back after that. Now, this healthcare stuff coming up. Dick Morris, who I watch often, have little comments, and he really brought up a lot of things about this current health care. It's in the Senate. That's pretty good. I mean, the main things that bothered me about Obamacare was the mandate, the penalty, the taxes, and you have to have coverage of all possible scenarios, regardless of your age, your gender, and whatnot. And all those things are dealt with in there. They got rid of the hidden tax. I wasn't even aware until Dick Morris said it, that when you bought an aspirin in the store, there's a hidden tax on the inside an aspirin. So I didn't know any of this stuff. And I'm taking what he said at face value, but it looks like what it is relatively good. It does most of the stuff. Because what I personally want to do is I want to be able to buy whatever coverage I want, have a high deductible, and have a health savings account, and it boosts the health savings account a lot. So I like Rand Paul. You know, Ted Cruz has been pretty good at sticking with these things. I don't like politicians, but given they are in power, I was kind of defaulting with Rand Paul. But after watching this clip, and it's here, I don't want to start playing stuff like this. I'll have to find out how I can do this, but the links will be below. And so if you're so inclined, just come back to this or the website, and you could play it, or just look up Dick Morris. It's Dick Morris TV. You can look it up, and the title of it is "Don't Let the Senate Reject the New Healthcare Bill." So it's a good perspective. Of course, some of this stuff now has been old. It's a little old now because the news cycle is like minutes nowadays. But CNN deletes and retracts a story with Trump and Russia. The story did not meet CNN's editorial standards, has been retracted. And of course, the joke is standards. So now they are they got caught. They thought they can push it through, with the propaganda through, because in their mind, they're on cable news and everybody else is on the internet or what have you, and they could push it through. And they're seeing that they can't. So now they're tracking. And it also reminds me, back in the book 1984, Winston worked in, I forgot what the department was called, but his job was to go back into the past and change the news stories to reflect the current positions. And here you go. Thank goodness people screen capture. You have archiving of the internet, so it can't So then what they do is they delete the story, and then they put a little detraction, which kind of gives them, oh wow, these guys are pretty good, huh? They're willing to take a story down when they find something, but it's because people are jumping on them for it. I think did I mention this? I'll mention it again. You know, a group. I'm trying to think, what is the name of the actual, I'm going to open this link up, and we'll go to the wide view here. Center for Medical Progress did a series of undercover videos, and it was horrible. They're all talking over dinner about how they, some people have cut themselves on the broken baby bones that break through the skin when they're breaking apart and taking them out. I mean, you should listen to it, because you got to understand what we're dealing with here. People are psychopaths. Psychopaths don't have to go out and kill mass murderers. They can just become abortionists, for example. Calmly go to work, and they don't have the feeling. So they did undercover film exposing this. And in California, they passed a law, probably thanks to Project Veritas catching them people, that you can't film anybody without telling them. And what happened was they did. And so they got charged with 15 criminal charges. I don't know and 14 of them were dropped. And I don't know what the 15th was. Felony charges for recording, even though they were in a public area. And that's probably why they got it done, because they were invade privacy, conspiracy to invade privacy. Tried to get number 50. Count 15 is for an alleged conspiracy. So they also can refile it again. So it's not over yet, but these got to go to a jury trial, and you got to show the tapes to a jury trial. And I think, and it's of course going to cost thousands of dollars, which would bankrupt me if I had to do it. But hey, and kudos for that. As people were exposed to dismembering and selling unborn children, I wrote, and then they were charged. It's time to charge the traffickers, because what they were doing were illegal. You can't sell the body parts. And the whole idea about the age of the child is there's a problem with a child being born. If they can stay alive, then you can't kill them. And there's a famous guy, I say infamous because it wasn't very well publicized, in prison for doing that. They're not a lie, and Planned Parenthood, right? There's no expectation of privacy in a public place. This is where they're taking Trump's travel ban, and they're saying, well, he meant to screen out Muslims based on something he said before. They're interpreting it. That's not how it works. If nobody signed papers or have a recording of them saying, no, I'm not going to record you in our conversation, and then they do, there is some expectation of privacy in that aspect. But there's nothing was said. There was no written statements. You cannot record. You cannot do this and all that. And again, you were in a public place, so somebody sitting in another booth could have simply recorded them too. But see, this is evil working. You see, with the good guys, they don't get this clever. In fact, I always wondered about a verse that Jesus talked about where he gave an example of a servant who did things wrong for his master, and he was going to get fired. So what he did was he went to a lot of the creditors of his master, and he made a deal with them while he was still there employed to cut their debts down, and he got in favor with all these people. And so when he got fired, he had friends because he did them a favor. And Jesus talked about, would be that the kingdom of God was this clever. I'm paraphrasing. And I always cut, well, he did wrong, and I'm thinking, well, we'll get the point now in lieu of all this stuff. These people are twisting the law and using it backwards and forwards to try and do evil or get out of being caught doing evil. And you have the people on the good side or whatever saying, well, okay, I understand you didn't really mean that, so we won't. When it comes to fight evil, you have to do these kind of things. So I get that. I get that point. I'm not sure who this is. Michael Ricana Salutio is to be released from prison. Due to release from prison. Okay. I'm not familiar with the name, so if you can type in there, I can expound on that. Yeah. Here's another thing. Of course, Daily Caller is saying this because it's about Breitbart, but Ann Coulter had an article that appeared in Breitbart and others, and they talked about Bernie Sanders supporters and whatnot, and she had a link included in the article that, let me see, I'll get the link out here. And they kept the link out, which had a whole lot of negative stuff on it. And in other words, it was slightly sanitized, in other words. And so people are starting to worry that perhaps Breitbart is trying to get a little mainstream, if I can use that phrase, by softening things up here. So I got links to that. You can look into it to find out what the actual stuff was. Pretty heavy words and all that. So there's there. I'm trying to see. Yeah, get this. So Illinois, I am in Illinois. And Illinois is in trouble. I got to get all the advertisements. That's why I hate opening up these pages. Illinois is in trouble financially. Now, what it comes down to is Illinois is a very Democratic state, mostly because of the North in Chicago. Chicago is so Democratic that they sometimes can't find people to run as Republicans. There's nobody to run against people. So for years, they've been passing budgets, getting more behind debt. Well, the governor is a Republican, sort of like a Trump individual in that he was a very successful millionaire businessman who stepped up and said, Illinois is in trouble, and I want to step up like a businessman and see and how I can do to help this. And so he's been fighting with the Democratic legislature in trying to deal with the problems. And he will not sign a budget that's not geared toward a balanced budget, meaning that we're going to balance the budget in 7 years. Here's our plan. Here's where we're going to do it. Then he'll sign the budget. And they've just been sending him budgets. He hasn't signed a budget in 3 years. And they've been putting temporary budgets, which they're allowed to do on their own. And so now there's a proposal to dissolve Illinois. And there's a map you can see on the video here on the screen where he split up Illinois into Texas, Missouri, Iowa, Indiana, and Wisconsin. And I don't see that happening, but it is it'd be pretty interesting. Apparently, Wisconsin would get Winkletopia. What the heck? I'd have to look and see what that is, the names, but apparently Wisconsin would get Chicago. It'd be on the tip. I don't know if that'd be a blessing or a curse, but all right, that was that. Let me go back to the Facebook feed. I want to go through a few more things here before I start playing the article. Yeah, here's a quitter Democrat. The whole John Ossoff is that's old news now too. By the time I get to the show, it's been out for a while, but they spent $40 million on it and got fewer votes. This is the point, is that they spent a little under $40 million and got less votes than the Democratic challenger got in the November election, who spent $1,000. So he spent $1,000. He lost to the representative who later on got picked by Trump to be in a cabinet of some position. So he left. Now they have to fill that position. So in November, the Democratic challenger spent $1,000 and got more votes for him or her than John Ossoff got after spending $40 million. And then the Democrats spin it by going, well, out of the last four races, it got closer. It was 3.5% or so away. But if you would look at this, this guy spent $40 million and got less votes than the last election where the person spent $1,000 and got more votes. So it's just like, no matter what they do. All right, here we go. Okay. Recon Saludio, I apologize for reading here, wrote and used the Promise software with a secret backdoor to allow the individuals to be followed. Danny Casolaro was investigating it and was murdered. So send me these stories. I will include them into my deal. Now, back at Mueller, that's funny. Mueller's got a legion of lawyers, bottomless budget, unlimited jurisdiction. A lot of the people have been associated with the Democrats and Clintons, and yet people like Anonymous, of course, Anonymous, one of the drawbacks is you don't know who they are. As well as, I even remember Zeph Daniel talking a little bit about that, thinks that this is actually going to turn around and bite them back, and they're already starting to look into some Obama stuff. So, yeah, she says it's a very famous case. Famous does not mean that I know I'm aware of it. I have my vision, how I look into things is it's not broad. It's very open to it's like peripheral vision. It's very broad in its scope, but it focuses on various items and excludes others. So this is how it's both an advantage where I can come up with stories and cases and analysis of it that others can't, but I also miss other things. So I guess that's where I fit in with the group, is that, you know, what I do, what I find and comment on, I do, and others do as well. Now, I want to comment on this. We're getting close to the end here. I'm really, okay. This is running a lot later than I planned. I'm going to do this quickly. I posted a picture. Antarctic sea ice hits 35-year record high Saturday. It's actually from 2013. Okay, so this is one of the problems. I went through reading the article, but I missed the date on it. So this is from before, because we're hearing about the sea ice melting. But I also saw another article I see, 80s and 90s. This is when this took place, this person. But what happens is, so I just want to say it's an older story, but it's only 3 years ago. So with the ice melting and whatnot, you know, my whole point is there's cycles that happen. And my whole thing is it's not CO2, it's not carbon tax, that's my point in it. And it's not that I'm trying to put this out and going, see, they're lying, there really is a lot of ice. It means that there are cycles, and they have pipes when the ice was so bad that it's so frozen. And then you have other times in the past where the ice was so minimal that you could literally ship through the Arctic Ocean in the winter. So it's all cycles, as opposed to the man-made, which is all about politics. Russian bombers intercept 2 U.S. reconnaissance craft over Balkan Sea. This is, you know, you're playing with fire here. My whole hope is that there's some rope-a-dope going on. That's what I can describe. For those who know Muhammad Ali, he would be on the ropes and act like he was, I'm tired, I'm on the ropes, and then he'd come out and he'd knock somebody out. So I'm hoping there's some rope-a-dope here between the Russians and Americans where they're really going to work together, or they're not really they're not really at each other's throat like it looks, or maybe some of the deep state is, but Trump's really got some kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm giving Trump, it's funny, I was talking to Jim Jatras off the air. I'm giving Trump so much benefit of the doubt that I've never done this before as much in history. It's not because I even agree with them all. It's because there's some kind of a textural feeling to this, that there's something else working in the background. Like, you know, God is working in the background. Not that Trump is a saint, but that's what we've been taught in the churches. God works with people, regardless. So, I don't know. I just kind of, maybe I'm just hoping on that. I did have to repost last week's show because I had a problem with there's an echo that was in the system, because whenever I played a file, it would go back and record locally and then go back through my mixer. It's fixed. I put it up there. So I left the old one up there too. One says repaired. And the problem is you never upgrade your anything before a broadcast. I mean, it's so basic. I've been doing this for so many years, and I did, and it reset all my settings. Oh, my bad, but it's up there. I think I hit this stuff. There's Noonan, no collusion between Trumps and Russians. Let me be clear, the president is not under investigation. I think this goes back. Yeah, these are back. I did this on the other day. So let me go one more thing, and then I will we'll get to Jim Jatras, which is really kind of an important part of the show, and I'm talking about all this stuff. Well, let me just say this briefly. All right, I got it up on Facebook. If somebody's inclined. When I started the show, Feet to the Fire, back in 2003, I was an Art Bell fan, and he retired. And I wasn't thrilled with the replacement. And I said, you know what, I can do it. So I started broadcasting on what was then Live 365, and was later picked up by a worldwide internet radio. At the time, it was rare to do this stuff. I have all this technology that I have here from doing recording and working with bands back in the, everything playing around with tapes and stereos in the 70s to working with bands in the 80s and 90s, even 2000s, and recording my own stuff, 2000 and 10s. So when I started doing the radio, I had this leg up on the audio side, and then I just hooked into a computer. So I was doing that show, and I started doing a show in May. So let's see, January 5th, I started doing this, and in May, a friend got a hold of me. I used to be in a band with him a long time ago in the early 80s. This is 2003 now. Or throughout the 80s, let's say. And he got a hold of me on the internet. Hey, how you doing? And so on. And I had him come by, and we did a kind of a music comedy impromptu thing on Saturday night. And that became the Black Knight Squire G show. So after a while of goofing around with it, it's, hey, let's give this a whirl. And we were picked up by IBC Radio Network at both shows. We were syndicated on radio and so forth on the satellite. And we did the show. So I tried to cross-pollinate them because this show was more of a thinking, heady show. Let me just back to the main. Yeah. Kind of a thinking, heady show. We talked about topics, everything from aliens to some kind of politics. And what we did there was we touched in similar things, but it was more fun and whatnot. Well, I got a lot of email. Not a lot. I got enough to make me think. People were looking for this serious analytical person, and then when they watched the Black Knight Squire G show, it was kind of silly and intelligent and funny or what have you. And they were just, heck. Yeah. So it was kind of weird. They did, so I stopped combining the two, but we've been doing the show ever since. It's fun, 3-hour show. We've incorporated it in the video now. So what I did was I posted this on there with all the information. You can watch old shows and stuff. And if you're interested on Saturday nights, you can get on a mailing list or join the Black Knight Square G page, because we don't do the shows often. Right now, Gary's taking care of his mother who's infirmed, along with his father, and so it's not a lot. But you can come in. We can come on the air. We can put you on with Skype. We can goof around. I've had a lot of interviews with musicians as well. We've done things with Ed Cassidy of Spirit, John K. That was at Eat the Fire. Who's the other? Gosh, I can't think of it. Ebony Eyes. I can't think of this stuff. Anyway, we've had some interviews and local musicians would come and do live stuff. I'm starting to put up some videos from that. We have many years. I have full videos of us doing live shows out on the street. So, just thought I'd mention it here. Probably won't mention it again, just so that in case you're interested, you might want to stop by bksgshow.com. And then if you look on that Facebook post, you'll see all the other stuff. Don't expect earth-shattering. It's fun, and it's music fun. Was it music, frolic, rock and roll, and whatnot? So, all right, let me let that go, because I think we got this all. There was one other thing I was going to say. Let me scoop back real quick. I think I see that. All right, I said we got it all. All right, so let me go to the interview I did with James Jatras. I could do a little more chatting in the chat room because it's hard for me to walk and chew gum, let alone type and talk. So, saying a lot of SOA, I don't like that. And we'll set it again. Let me go to the interview and play this. Now, I did notice that in the interview I had the wrong email for a while for Jim Jatras. So remember, look at the down. I have the correct one underneath, and I'm going to try and mask it when it pops up with the correct one. So if you see that popping on and off, when I process this, I'm going to put this little interview up separately. And when I do that, I'm going to try and come up with a way to do that. So, I wonder why this is. Oh, it's the other side. All right. Anyway, here we go with. All right, we have with us today for a segment on a topic of the U.S. funding terrorism with Jim Jatras. He's a government media relations, former U.S. diplomat, GOP Senate foreign policy advisor, and has been around the area. We're talking in the Mideast, Russia, in the areas, and he has been there, studied, saw, and I like to get his opinion on things because he's a thinker and with experience on the ground. He tweeted out basically where I found him, this topic, is he tweeted out about an article that was written, and you can get to his tweet at Jim Jatras, at Jim Jatras. There's his account there on Twitter. I'd advise getting it on there. Very good points that stand counter to the mainstream, and yet it's not. It's an independent mind that uses critical thinking, which is not really, it's kind of rare in the media these days. So let me welcome Jim Jatras back to Feet to the Fire. Welcome. Oh, it would help to turn on your sound. We have the link up here to this article that you tweeted. So let's go to that and I'll start in on it. How it's on the AmericanConservative.com website, how America armed terrorists in Syria. And if you would like to bring up some points about that.
Sure. Well, to start with, Gareth Porter, the author of the article, is a very well-known, distinguished journalist, writes for a number of outlets, including Consortium News and the American Conservative. I think the main point of this article is that there's, to be honest, for those of us who've been following this for some time, there's not a whole lot of new information in there, but he has really assembled in one place what has been a very consistent pattern for the past almost 6 years now, since the Syrian war began in 2011, of outside support for groups in Syria that we know are terrorist groups that are either part of al-Qaeda or some offshoots of al-Qaeda, or eventually one of them which developed into what they call the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, ISIL, Daesh. And this was done knowingly. This was done as a deliberate element of geopolitics, that for whatever reason we need to get rid of Assad, we want to counter the Russians or the Iranians, we need to give weapons to these so-called moderate groups that we know are not moderate. They are in fact al-Qaeda. And one of the things he points out, for example, was something, again, that people knew who had been following this, but you never see it really discussed in the mainstream media from either the Republicans or the Democrats, is what really happened at Benghazi, that was not a consulate. It was an embassy annex that was involved in a CIA operation to run weapons from Gaddafi's stocks to the jihadists in Syria. And then things got out of hand, and 4 Americans got killed. But that was the nature of the operation there. One thing that Mr. Porter talks about in his article that I had not been aware of was the taking weapons from a number of countries in Central Europe and the Balkans, including some stocks left over from the Balkan Wars of the 1990s, and this involved Croatia, Serbia, Czech Republic, a number of other countries, that these weapons were also transported by the CIA to so-called moderates in Syria, who are anything but moderates, that they have vastly strengthened al-Qaeda in Syria. And a lot of it gets down to the question of why are we doing this and what can we do to stop it? And Mr. Porter begins his article with reference to a bill that's pending in the Congress calling the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. It's introduced in the House by Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat from Hawaii, and in the Senate it by Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky. And it's pretty straightforward. It means no American money can be used to arm either Al-Qaeda, one would think that would be obvious, or the Islamic State, ISIS, again, that would be obvious, or any groups that are collaborating or allied with them. This means Ahrar al-Sham, Jaish al-Islam, and all these other Sunni Wahhabist terrorist groups that are allied with primarily with Al-Qaeda. It also means, and this is probably where the real rub comes in, that we would also cut off weapons to other countries that are funding them. And as we know, over the last 6 years, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Turks, and several other countries have been providing weapons to these very same groups. And I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is that when we aid radical Islamic terrorist groups, when we give them weapons, when we give them money, that increases the threat of terrorism here in the United States. And I don't mean in the conventional sense of blowback. We make people angry and they come back and hit us. What I mean is, if you strengthen terrorist groups, you get more terrorism. And you build the platform that they then can use to strike us back here in the United States. So I think that Mr. Porter and the American Conservative have done the public a great service here. I don't know how much attention this article will get in Washington among policymakers who have been very resistant to the notion that we need literally an act of Congress to stop this arms supply to terrorist groups in Syria, but I hope it's something that people pay attention to and will spur some action.
What was I kind of liked about Tulsi Gabbard, and she actually went to the area, talked with Syria's president, and looked into things personally, and came back. Now, she got a lot of people mad at her, both Republicans and Democrats, because she was basically kind of saying that it's best to go with Assad and try to knock him out, if I summarize it properly. And she caught a lot of grief on it. But I am always impressed with somebody who, A, has got eyes on the ground, and B, when they actually look at it, kind of come up with something against the grain that they normally are flowing in their party. That generally means that they've actually looked into things.
That's right, and she has done exactly that. She did go to Syria. As I understand it from her account, she did not originally intend to meet with President Assad, but ended up doing so since she was there and he offered the meeting. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. She makes a point of saying, however, she's not supporting President Assad. Her job, her concern is that we are not supporting the terrorists. And I think that makes perfect sense. You don't have to endorse Assad to say we should not be arming and funding the terrorists who were trying to overthrow him and create a terrorist state in what is now Syria. So I think a lot of the criticism that's been directed against her is tremendously unfair. It seems that she's gotten a lot more flack actually from her own party, the Democratic Party, than she has from the Republicans. If you look at her 13 co-sponsors on her bill, I believe 3 of them are Democrats and the other 10 are Republicans. But even among Republicans, she's not getting a whole lot of support. We have a lot of people saying they're concerned about the situation in Syria, particularly concerned about the Christians in Syria who are, before the war started, were about 13% of the population. It's probably less than that now because so many of them have had to flee abroad, but that you'd think you'd be able to put 2 and 2 together. If we're concerned about Christians in Syria, why are we giving weapons to radical Muslim jihadists who are killing them, enslaving them, doing all the things that we know that these groups do?
It would seem that the goal, which has been going on for a long time, with Saddam, for example, supporting him while he fought Iran, and then supporting what I guess later turned into Al-Qaeda because they fought Russia and Afghanistan. It seems to be this idea of, we'll support these guys because they're fighting these other guys, but the collateral damage of what else they do isn't as important, and then they end up turning back on the U.S. plans or whatever eventually. So it seems that not a lot of thought go into this, or maybe they just don't care.
I really do wonder myself whether it's they don't care or they're not thinking through, or it's a question of perspective. It seems that they're so focused on achieving A, they really don't care about what the fallout is. Look, what's the granddaddy of all blowback? It's 9/11. We give we gave all these arms and money to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to fight the Soviet Union. Maybe that made sense at the time. It was a Cold War on communism, all of that. But we built a monster in the process, and that monster came back and hit us. And it seems that you should be able to draw some lessons from that you can't just hand out weapons like candy to dangerous people and then not expect bad things to happen afterward. And unfortunately, I think a lot of this idea is so ingrained in elements of the deep state, and let me say parenthetically, the same deep state that is working very hard to try to neutralize President Trump, and I think remove him from office, that it is so ingrained in some of these agencies that, well, these people are operational. These are people who can get things done. These are useful people for geopolitical ends, that they don't really think through what the long-term consequences are. I mean, look at the late Zbigniew Brzezinski's response to, was it a good idea to aid the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, even though it turned into Al-Qaeda and came back to hit us? His answer is, of course it was the right thing to do. What's more important, overthrowing communism or a bunch of riled-up Muslims? Well, maybe in the long term, a bunch of riled-up Muslims will become a much bigger problem for us than we had anticipated. And I think that's a lesson that is still not learned by a lot of people here in Washington.
Yeah, I think there's too many either-ors. Let's look at the multiple facets of it, that when you do start something here, you have all these effects. I wanted to go back to something I said about her supporting Assad. I guess what I meant by that was the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know, so to speak, and he is a civilian as opposed to a religious-related guy, and he does allow Christians, so to speak. I don't think his people are out after Christians. I mean, it seems like that the painting that both parties have done is painted him into this to be this mass murdering dictator, terrible type stereotype, which I'm guessing isn't as bad as it is, whatever bad may be there.
Well, to start with, as far as Bashar al-Assad goes personally, as people may know, he never wanted to be president of this country. This is not somebody who, through some vaulting ambition, like, say, Saddam Hussein in Iraq, really wanted to install himself in power. That wasn't the case of Bashar. His older brother, Basil, was the one who was being groomed by their father, Hafiz al-Assad, to be the president, and he was killed in an accident. Bashar he's an eye doctor. He was practicing in Britain when suddenly the throne became vacant, so to speak, and the Ba'athist party and the Alawite leadership, he's from the Alawite religious group in Syria, which is the most important group there, but I think people sometimes misconstrue Syria as a sectarian state, which it is not. It's a very strongly secular state, which is one reason why Christians and other minorities tend to be very supportive of the Syrian government, because they see the alternative is a very sectarian, very intolerant, not only just Sunni, but Wahhabist state of the ideology that these guerrillas these terrorists are fomenting. And by the way, I put in that category many of the Sunnis in Syria. Remember, Syria is a Sunni majority country, but an awful lot of Sunnis, they don't want to live under a Sharia state. They don't want to live under a caliphate. They want to live like normal people in a normal country, and not have to put headscarves on their daughters or get whipped or killed for having a beer. And so I think there are a lot of Sunnis who want to live in a modern, secular, tolerant state, which, whatever its authoritarian tendencies might be in Syria, is that as opposed to a sectarian state. Look, most of the soldiers in the Syrian army are Sunnis. Most of the cabinet ministers and the generals are Sunnis. The first lady is a Sunni. The idea that this is an intolerant, anti-Sunni sectarian state is simply not true. It's a national state of all Syrians, whether they're Christian or Shia or Sunni or Druze or Kurd or Alawite. And I think that's what the people supporting the government see, especially when they see what the alternative is, which is somebody who's going to cut their head off.
That's not a good alternative. So let me ask you.
Not really, not so much.
So I look at this as I'm not an educated expert in this. I'm just some a guy who's got an open mind and keeps his ears open. And I look and I see the U.S. supporting Saudi Arabia, who are Wahhabis. They're supporting. They're going against and seem to be the wrong side in Syria. It's like Russia seems to actually be going after the right terrorists. I mean, what's driving the U.S. to pick the wrong side, let's call it? Yeah, can you kind of put it in a sentence or two? Because it's amazing to me.
I don't know if I could put it in a sentence or two. I think part of it is clientitis in the sense we used to call that at the State Department, clientitis, when people were infected by the view of their client country rather than what's good for the United States. And I think we unfortunately see that with respect to Saudi Arabia. But again, we need to mention Qatar and Turkey. I think we also have this notion that is just sort of ingrained in the operating code of so much of our government that Iran is the bad guy and Russia is the bad guy, so that everybody who is opposed to Iran and Russia are, quote, on our side and they're on the other side. And you hear this all the time with respect to the Russian intervention in Syria. The idea that, well, why are the Russians in Syria? They're just there to thwart American policy. They're just playing spoiler. Look, I've talked to a lot of people on the Russian side, and I've never heard anybody who thinks in those terms. The way they tend to think of the situation in Syria is they say, look what happened in Libya when you overthrew that guy. You created a failed state. You've got terrorists running amok. Russia cannot afford to have that a long day's drive from their border. I don't know how many people watched the interview with Vladimir Putin by Oliver Stone, where Stone said in so many words, the United States has supported terrorists in Chechnya within the borders of Russia against the Russian state, along with all the other terrorists that we've supported. They tend to look at all these terrorists as all the same. When they first began their intervention and started bombing terrorist groups in Syria, you heard people saying, well, the Russians are lying. They said they would go there to fight ISIS, and they're not fighting ISIS. They're fighting U.S.-supported moderates. Yeah, the U.S.-supported moderates, as we see in the article this week from Gareth Porter, they're all al-Qaeda or people who are allied with al-Qaeda. There are no moderates. I met recently with a group of bishops from Syria and Iraq and Lebanon, who they said that in so many words. When somebody asked the question about the moderate opposition, they broke into derisive laughter, and they say, there are no moderates. They're all terrorists. And this notion that you can separate out the al-Qaeda ones and you should not fight against them, but we should fight against ISIS simply doesn't make any sense. They all share the same ideology, the same violent terrorist tactics, and they're the same kind of threat, it seems to me, to any civilized person in any country. And I think that's something that the Russians feel much closer to. Right, for them, Syria is 600 miles away. For us, it's 6,000 miles away. There's a huge difference. The other thing, of course, is that they don't have the same love affair with the Saudis and Wahhabism that so much of our establishment does. The Saudis aren't buying billions, tens of billions of dollars of weapons from them or spending billions of dollars to lobby people here in Washington. For the Russians, and I know a lot of people will not take this seriously, part of it has to do with the fact that the Russian Orthodox Church has a very strong influence over government policy. This is not the atheist Soviet Union. The church is a very major and respected force in Russian life today, including something that the government takes heed of, which is why one reason that they have such a conservative social policies compared to what we see in Western Europe and the United States. And when the church says to the government that we are concerned about Christians in Syria, we don't want to see them killed by the jihadists, that's something that the government takes seriously. It seems our government does not.
Well, let me take this opportunity before we wind up about this website you sent me, No Arms for Terrorists.
Yeah.
What is What is this, a website? Well, No Arms for Terrorists.
This is a campaign that I'm involved with. You see there, John Eibner. He is the CEO of Christian Solidarity International. This is one of the premier groups that's been around for quite some years to provide aid and assistance to persecuted Christians around the world. Initially, when they started out, largely communist countries, now primarily Muslim countries, although they also still are concerned with countries like, say, China and North Korea and so forth. But it's a group that's been around for a long time, very reputable, and they've decided that this is a key issue right now. This idea that we need to stop supporting terrorists in Syria and Iraq and the purposes and principles behind the Stop Arming Terrorists Act is something they wanted to launch a specific campaign for. So that's what this website is. No Arms for Terrorists, na4t.org.
Okay, well, we will put this in the hopper. I was probably in closing, if I can ask about the Qatar, however they say it, a deal where all of a sudden President Trump goes over there and does the little sword dance. He touches the globe of Sauron and all that stuff people had talked about. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if it's days later, all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia is cutting off relationships with Qatar, and they're supporting terrorism and all this. It just seemed to come out of nowhere, or is it related to this trip, you think?
It's as I used to say back in the Soviet Union, there are no coincidences, comrade. That I don't think is an accident that not too long after President Trump went to Riyadh, that the Saudis, and particularly the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, the son of the current king, who's essentially a very doddering old man and incompetent. So Prince Mohammed essentially runs Saudi Arabia. Now, he's the guy responsible for the carnage in Yemen right now, where the Saudis have been just destroying the country, attempting to reinstall their chosen figure there. He's the one who's been very strongly pushing support for these terrorist groups in Syria. And no doubt he felt emboldened by President Trump's mission to try to resolve his outstanding differences with Qatar, a neighboring state. Now, look, in my opinion, the Qataris' hands are not clean either. When the Saudis accuse the Qataris of aiding terrorists, they're right, because the Saudis ought to know, because they aid the very same terrorists. In fact, provide even more aid than the Qataris do. Again, all the Al-Qaeda affiliates and ISIS and so forth. What the Saudis really seem to be miffed about is that the Qataris talk to the Iranians, who the Saudis consider their main enemy, and the Qataris kind of have to do that because they're right across the Persian Gulf from Iran, and they essentially share the same gas field. Whereas Saudi Arabia is primarily an oil power, Qatar is primarily a natural gas power, and they have to cooperate with the Iranians on the exploitation of their joint oil field. The other thing is that the Qataris support the Muslim Brotherhood, a group that I hold in very low regard. I think it's a very bad, dangerous group, but it's the Saudis consider them too dangerously democratic, not in terms of their radical ideology, but in terms of their, let's say, more lower class leanings, as opposed to the privileged monarchical structure you find in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis, in fact, themselves used to provide a lot of aid to the Muslim Brotherhood until they saw the Arab Spring getting this whole populism, overthrow elites thing out of control, and they got cold feet about that and have turned against them. So the Saudis have their own axes to grind with the Qataris. We should keep in mind, by the way, that in the first and second Saudi states, people forget this is the third Saudi state. The first and second ones went defunct in 1818 and 1891, respectively. What is now Qatar was part of those earlier Saudi states, and I'm sure there are some people in Riyadh, including Prince Mohammed, would love to see them annex Qatar and just add all those gas resources to their portfolio.
Well, after seeing this meeting, Trump sells them billions in weaponry. They cut off Qatar, and I didn't know about them being part of the old Saudi regime, so now it's all starting to gel, and it doesn't look pretty.
Yeah, the interesting thing there too is that because the Saudis have chosen to go after the Qataris, we're seeing this odd game of musical chairs now in terms of Middle Eastern alignment. Because coming now to support the Qataris are the Iranians and also the Turks, who are a Sunni country, but one that has their own problems with the Saudis. They are themselves big supporters of the Muslim Brotherhoods. They have a base in Qatar, not too far from where the American base is in Qatar, and of course Turkey is a NATO member. So things are getting complicated and messy. The Turks have been on the same side as the Qataris and the Saudis as far as Syria goes, but now we see them working more closely with the Russians and the Iranians, partly because they're less concerned about Assad now and more concerned about the Kurds. So things change.
All right. Well, is there anything we missed? Because that you want to add in here before we go?
The only thing I would like to add is that I hope your viewers will take a look at the na4t.org page and check in with their representative, their congressmen and their senators about support for the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. That's a very important piece of legislation. We're not, from the point of view of our campaign, we're less focused on the bill itself than on the purposes behind it. The United States should not be giving weapons to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, and the groups that are allied with them. I mean, you'd think it wouldn't take an act of Congress to do that, but it turns out we do. Yeah. So if people can focus on that issue and read that article, read the article by Gareth Porter in the American Conservative, because I think it's an essential piece of public awareness.
Well, I appreciate you being here with us, and I like your availability, and I can predict that we'll probably be talking more because things probably will get worse before they get better, if they get better. But people can subscribe on Twitter to you at Jim Jatras and get your information as it comes out. And I appreciate that information. So we will talk again, and thanks for taking some time with us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. I for those, I did remember something I wanted to share, and since it was pretty nice, fun stuff, I thought I wanted to kick in here before I put Less Visible on for it. Let me go to the web page. There we go. There's a picture of me with the dog Charlie. If you recall, a while ago, Charlie was looking at some surgery, and he's doing good, and I took him out for a ride. There's a little vest that goes around. He goes into it. It looks like a backpack, only there's arms and legs and a tail hole. And so I went and took him out for a ride, and I thought that was pretty fun. Also, because Charlie went for the surgery, we thought it'd be good to get another dog, more for Lucinda, but I like it too, so that Charlie could kind of break him in, if you will. He's got several years left if things go fine. You know, if the prostate shrinks, which it should. He's got several more years, so he can hang out as well. So we got Molly. Here's a picture. Oh, it's not working out, though. Let me switch to the other one. There we go. There's Molly, who is a 3/4 Jack Russell, a little more Jack Russell than I bargained for. 1/4 of a fox? No. Fox Terrier? I think something like that. But you could see it's all Jack Russell. She is amazing. She could jump unbelievably high, well over 3 feet high, probably 4 feet from her snout. Pretty amazing for the little dog. And then his last picture was a picture of Charlie and Molly taking this rest in the sun. So Molly has grown since that picture, but I thought that was pretty cute. And you know, we hear about all kinds of bad stuff, so I thought I would share a little bit of nice stuff before, and then we'll get to Less Visible now, and he will take us out of here.
Welcome, my dear friends. Trying to slip in a radio broadcast here on this day, Sunday. I have a guest in, and of course, as you know, that generally tends to whittle away one's time, focus, concentration, everything else, and eventually maybe something good comes out of it. I don't know, usually something does. I'd like to welcome you to Dog Poet transmitting. I'd like to welcome you to the consulate of the Arcturian Brotherhood and the Sirius Cluster. This is a small outpost, a cluster, a long way away from these far more evolved civilizations, which, I've matriculated from, but it doesn't make me any more evolved, actually, but it's just that that's where I come from. I don't come from here. And you're going to find out a lot in short order here recently as it starts to become claimed that aliens are among us, and that's their next stop, folks. And for all we know, the aliens are controlling the aliens that are among us, but I digress. This visit I have, it's from a reader of the blogs for 10 years now. Really sweet guy, very nice person. And so it's been time consuming in a very nice way. It's a beautiful thing to know that even though you may have failed according to the standards of the world, you have succeeded according to the standards of the human heart, and that's not something that we want to make light of. Or we could, whatever. I've mentioned reading biographies before. How important I think it is for anyone wanting to understand history, according to the lives of some of the people that were in it, not according to the way the record has been presented to indicate what took place, which probably is not how it went. You learn so much. You learn so much about the personal struggles of these individuals in the world, as it goes, and the living realities of the time. For instance, you go back a couple hundred years, whatever, something like that, to the time of Charles Dickens, and they were hanging 9-year-olds for stealing a loaf of bread. Oh, yeah, they were. And there are traditions like women walking on the inside, men on the outside, that just people used to throw their garbage and their shit out of the windows. And it tended to hit the person furthermost out. And that's where, that courtesy came from. Because even though apparently the feminine is not held in high regard these days, enter rap, which I think pretty much expresses where that generation views the divine feminine. Oh, there's going to be hell to pay, I suspect. Well, that's not my concern. Charles Dickens is a true hero. Rarely recognized much for it, what he did about the child labor laws and all kinds of things with his marvelous works. We, as individuals, are a part of the composite of crazy glued together uneducated idiots. Nice little dungles. Anyway, have come to our understandings of we leave out some of the tremendous impact that certain individuals have had on existence, and he's one of them. What we remember Charles Dickens for mostly is it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, Sidney Carton and all the rest of that, Tale of Two Cities. I've got my heroes that have come my way through biographies. One of them is Luther Burbank, I mention him a lot. George Washington Carver, inventor of the peanut. Oh, there's a huge amount of them. Thomas Jefferson, I would certainly add to the mix. I had this restaurant in Maui, 25 years ago now, and one of the originators of Findhorn, Peter, we'll just do first names here. He showed up at my restaurant and we were talking about Findhorn. This is before it became like a sissy. That's the place where St. Francis used to wander about, and now has been turned into this bizarre tchotchke shop, the entire place. And Benedictine monks running around with cell phones and being treated by rock stars. People coming from there, and the monk going, acting literally like a celebrity. And I don't know what these people get up to, and I don't think I want to know. Biographies are an important thing to pay attention to because you learn sometimes about the struggles that are required by some individuals to actually get done what they got done. You know, there's ordinary life and then there's extraordinary life. And if you want to be a part of extraordinary life or have an extraordinary life, you got to go through some extraordinary things. I don't know why it's like that. I don't know why so much is asked of us down here when, like so many, you can, I'll get to these people in a minute. You can just, tra-la-la-la and tiptoe through the tulips with Tiny Tim, and I think he's horizontal at this point. Anyway, I watch this world through an unbreakable pane of glass. Pane of, oh wow, could have been a couple of ways I could have gone with that, but I think I'll stick with this. And I see forms dance in front of me through this pane of glass, and I see them enter and depart, and I look for impact, and I know what has made and changed me. What has preserved and illuminated me has been the works and footprints of others who have gone before. Why I brought up Charles Dickens and some of these other people. My recommendation is study the lives of extraordinary people and become one. Or else, be like everyone else. Like awareness, I tell you. Put that on your Christmas shopping list. If you want to get yourself a gift this Christmas, get yourself awareness. Because one thing about awareness is, awareness leads to awareness, which leads to a greater awareness. Awareness is a spiral, okay? Knowledge may be circular, okay? There's a certain amount of it, but that's all there is. Whereas awareness, it increases in dimensions of its capacity to perceive and become aware of. It just keeps growing. Awareness grows and grows and grows until you come up against the fringes of the Almighty. Yeah, something like that. I don't know what's wrong with people. I cross their path every day, the upscale, the downscale, the mid-scale, the people with scales on them, We were invited by this couple across the street the other day. In this community, there's what there is. And there's a golf course here, These people are always out on the golf course, and they had a nice place. They had this, sculptured pool out in the back and these grounds and stuff. They'd invited another couple over, and what I could see, golf was God. This is all they were in a position to discuss and all they had a desire to discuss. And I don't have any real interest in golf, Golf to me is what happens when you get too old to play any real legitimate sport, because golf's a game. And I'd rather shoot pool, or play ping pong, or do something, I don't know. I don't know what it is I have against golf. I don't really have anything against golf. I think I might be fairly good at it if I put my attention on it. But the people I would have to hang out with would be, that might become unbearable for me. So, anyway, I'm here in this little gathering. I'm trying to hold it together, say the right things, not be like I can be on occasion, a little disarming, and, say things that don't get forgotten so easily. And I thought I was doing a good job. But as I was sitting there and the conversation was going on, I looked over at this woman across the way who was looking at me with these beady eyes, these hardly, very roughly hewn out of the ground agate eyes, And she knew I wasn't one of them. Oh, she knew. Of course, I was wearing this too. She didn't say anything, but I could tell. He's not our sort. And I was doing everything I could to get along with these people, you know? But I saw it, I sensed it. And the other one that's sitting next to me, she was getting a little too close also. I'm not sure what she was up to at all, to tell you the truth. But among this particular circle of people, they get up to all kinds of things. And, you know, I often feel like I'm in one of those films, The Day of the Triffids or The Body Snatchers, you know, that whole Jacuzzi faction, you know, with Madame Defarge and Danton and Robespierre and the rest of those guys. And they're all grinning at me and off with their heads. And should I mention Lewis Carroll was a mathematician? I guess I won't. I think he had something to do with that too. You know, I'm guessing I won't entirely fit in around here. Especially I notice it when I take my guitar and I plug it into the amp and I don't know if they can hear me or not. I don't care. But I know sooner or later I'm not going to fit in. And I don't care. Because in the meantime, I got to talk about the ineffable. And somebody somewhere is going to hear it, you know? And that's really how it is. You move through this life and you come up against all kinds of different people. And if you are a servant of the ineffable, which I like to imagine that I am, you speak about the ineffable when you get the opportunity, when you don't feel it'll be too intrusive or anything. And at some point, someone's going to hear you. And if you can reach just that one person in the mix, well, then you've accomplished a great deal. That's my feeling, okay? Otherwise, there they go. Outside the window over here all day long, the golf carts are going by. Somebody hit their golf ball about an hour ago earlier, and they landed up right near our front, our patio there. And I opened the door and I went, "Hey, nice shot." The guy gave me a seriously dirty look, you know, and I said it in a really nice way and kind of, you know, like camaraderie sort of thing. But, geez, I guess that was not the time. People really take themselves way too seriously. You know, they really think, look at these levels of importance in their own heads. I don't know where they get it from. The only thing important, my friends, is the ineffable. Okay? Love the ineffable. If you do that, there will be a way for you to be lifted out of this. You don't want to get caught up in what's about to go on out here. It's not a nice place to be. You know, you can see it. If you can't see it, I don't know really how to help or inform you at this point. But you can see as people move more into the material and further away from the spiritual and the ineffable and all the rest of it, that inevitably bad things are probably going to take place, at least with and for them, not necessarily for us, right? And, oh, right, I'm supposed to cut these broadcasts short now. I forgot again. Sorry, James. Really sorry. Okay, time to go. End of another broadcast, and I'll see you next week if there is one. In the meantime, Hare Krishna. Hail, Lord Jesus Christ. Om Amitabha. Greetings, my good friend, Lord Ganesh. La ilaha il Allahu. Micham Anbu. Guru Bawa. Much love, Lady Nature. Carry on, Baha'u'llah. Aloha and more or less. God bless you, one and all. I love you greatly, deeply, and more than I can possibly express.